Coach did not disappear because women forgot the brand. It almost disappeared because they remembered it for the wrong reason. That is a different kind of problem. Forgetting is clean. Forgetting means you start over, rebuild from nothing, reintroduce yourself. But being remembered as the brand at the outlet mall, the bag on the clearance rack, the leather goods name that was once serious and had since become ordinary, that is harder to recover from. That kind of memory sits in the market like a stain, visible, persistent, resistant to easy removal. Coach spent years living under that memory. Then it did something that most brands in its position never manage. It came back. This is the full story. The beginning has nothing to do with fashion. In 1941, in a loft in Manhattan's Midtown district, a small workshop began producing leather goods. 6 artisans, handmade wallets, billfolds, belts. The production was slow, careful, and rooted in a tradition of American craft that had no interest in trends or runway seasons. The leatherwork was functional. It was built to last. Every stitch was meant to outlast the occasion. The founding name was the Manhattan Leather Bag Company. It would become Coach. What distinguished the early product was not luxury in the European sense. It was not heritage in the way that French or Italian houses understood heritage. Centuries of craft, family dynasties, royal appointments. American heritage was different. It was more direct. It was the quality of the thing itself, the honesty of the materials, the confidence that what you were holding would not fall apart in a year. Coach drew inspiration from an unexpected source. The leather on a baseball glove, broken in, warm, supple, with a texture that improved with handling. The company studied how that leather aged, how it absorbed use and grew better for it. That philosophy became the foundation of the product. Coach bags were not meant to look perfect on a shelf. They were meant to live, to be carried daily, to develop character over time. That idea, leather is something that earns its character, was the original promise. Through the 1960s and 1970s, Coach built a reputation. Not a loud reputation. Not a celebrity-driven reputation. A quiet one. The kind that passes between women at the office, between mothers and daughters, between colleagues who notice what someone is carrying and recognize it as a sign of good judgment. Coach bags were aspirational without being theatrical. They did not announce themselves. They communicated something more restrained. I have standards. I know quality when I see it. I am not chasing a name, I am buying something real. For American women, that positioning had a specific emotional resonance. The European luxury houses, Chanel, Hermes, Louis Vuitton, occupied a different orbit. Aspirational in the way that things you cannot yet afford are aspirational. Desirable precisely because they remain out of reach. Coach sat closer. It was the first real leather handbag for many women. The one purchased to mark something. A promotion, a graduation, a first professional job, a decade of saving. It was serious without being inaccessible, polished without being cold, American in a way that implies durability over decoration. It was, for a long time, exactly what it intended to be. Then the brand began to grow. Department stores, mall locations, expanding product lines, broader distribution, more price points, more doors, more customers. The logic of growth is difficult to argue against when it is working. Revenue increases, recognition increases, recognition increases. The name travels further, reaches more people, appears in more places. By the 1980s and into the 1990s, Coach was a serious American retail brand. By the time the company went public in 2000, it was operating at a scale that its original loft workshop could never have imagined. But growth in the leather goods category is not neutral. The problem with being everywhere is that everywhere is the opposite of special. The outlet stores changed everything. Outlet retail is a specific instrument. Its function is to clear excess inventory, capture a price-sensitive customer segment, and extend the reach of a brand into markets where full-price product cannot operate profitably. When used carefully, with restraint, it can coexist with the brand's full-price identity without undermining it. Coach did not use it with restraint. As outlet doors multiplied across the country, in every outlet center in every region, the customer psychology around the full-price Coach offering began to shift in ways that were slow, invisible, and almost impossible to reverse. A shopper who knows that a Coach bag is available at an outlet for significantly less than its full-price retail cost does not experience the full-price store the same way afterward. The full-price number becomes hypothetical, a starting point, something to wait out. And a brand whose full price is not believed is a brand whose prestige is leaking. There is another layer to the outlet problem. Some of the product sold through outlet channels was manufactured specifically for those locations. Not full-price product moved downstream, but a separate, lower-cost product line designed for the outlet customer. When that distinction became known, when customers understood that what they were buying at the outlet was not the same as what they saw in the flagship, the brand's story about craftsmanship and quality became harder to tell consistently. The signal started to change. By the mid-2000s, something else was happening. Coach had become familiar, deeply familiar, in a way that had shifted from reassuring to predictable. The brand was everywhere, not in the way that communicates ubiquity of success, but in the way that communicates ubiquity of availability. The bags appeared in outlet malls, department store sales events, discount seasons, and online flash deals. The image had softened. The edges had blurred. Among younger women, the consumers who would determine where the brand sat in the next decade, Coach had begun to occupy a specific and uncomfortable position. It was not disrespected. It was recognized. But recognition without desire is not enough to build a luxury-adjacent brand on. Coach was the bag their mothers carried, the bag associated with a certain age, a certain suburb, a certain comfort with the familiar. That is a hard image to disrupt, not because it is wrong. Coach's quality, its leather heritage, its durability, none of that had disappeared. But perception does not always track reality. And once a perception calcifies, product quality alone cannot dissolve it. What made Coach powerful also made it fragile. Its accessibility, the thing that had allowed so many women to own a first real leather bag, had accumulated over time into the association it was now trying to escape. The comeback did not come from pretending the past never happened. That is the important thing to understand. Coach did not try to become something it had never been. It did not reposition itself as ultra-luxury, did not obscure its American origins, did not attempt a wholesale identity transformation that would have felt false. It did something more difficult and, ultimately, more durable. It remembered what it had originally been. Under new creative direction, the brand began telling a different version of its own story. Not the outlet story, not the department store discount story, the leather workshop story, the craftsmanship story. The archival silhouettes, the shapes that had defined Coach decades earlier, came back, reinterpreted with modern proportions, but rooted visibly in the brand's original aesthetic. Heritage was not merely referenced, it was excavated and made central. Bags like the Tabby became cultural markers in ways that the brand had not seen in years. Not because they were aggressively marketed, because they felt like something that had earned its shape. Because they carried the visual language of a brand with actual history, and that history, which had once felt like a liability, began to feel like an asset. The timing mattered. Consumer culture had shifted. The loud logo era, the maximalist brand signaling decade, the moment when the visible monogram was the point of the purchase. That era had passed. Not completely, not uniformly, but the momentum had changed. Among younger shoppers in particular, the appetite for heritage, quality leather, vintage appeal, and a quieter kind of status had grown considerably. Coach, with its decades of archival leather work, its older silhouettes, its very American craft story, was suddenly positioned to speak to something the market was asking for. The familiarity that had once felt like a weakness now had a different texture. It could be read as history, as authenticity, as something that had been around long enough to mean something. The secondary market told part of the story. Older Coach bags, the ones from the 1970s and 1980s, with their minimal hardware and heavy leather, had quietly developed a collector following. Not among luxury investors chasing Birkins and Chanel flaps. Among women who understood leather, appreciated craft, and recognized that something made in a different era, with different standards, was worth finding and keeping. That underground appreciation was a signal. The brand had a foundation of genuine quality to build on. The question was whether it could translate that foundation into modern relevance without losing what made the foundation real. Coach is not ultra-luxury. It does not need to be. Its modern position is something different and, in some ways, more interesting. It is a brand with genuine American heritage that nearly consumed itself through overexposure and that rebuilt its image by returning to the thing that had made it worth carrying in the first place: the leather. The craft. The idea that a bag should get better with use rather than deteriorate with it. That is not a small thing to offer. In a market full of fast fashion bags and logo-heavy status plays and disposable trends, the argument for something durable, something rooted in craft, something with an actual history, that argument lands differently than it once did. Coach did not solve every problem. The outlet association is not entirely erased. The perception work is ongoing. Brand reputation is not a switch that flips. It is a slow accumulation of decisions, product quality, storytelling, and time. But the arc exists. The comeback is real. The bags that once lived in outlet centers now share shelf space in a cultural conversation about heritage, quality, and what it means to carry something worth keeping. This is the full story. From the American leather house that 6 artisans built in a Manhattan loft, to the brand that grew too fast and spread too thin to the outlet, years that changed how the market read the logo, to the quiet excavation of a heritage that was always there, waiting to be rediscovered. The brand did not come back by becoming something new. It came back by becoming, again, what it had always been. This is the Bag Archives.